Good evening. Thanks very much, Pierre. At the end of chapter 2, we finished with the words, "The Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. So the Son of Man is Lord even of the Sabbath." Now, by great coincidence, yesterday I got in the mail this pamphlet from the Seventh-day Adventists, Sunday versus Sabbath. And at the back of it, they've got their proof text as to why Saturday remains or should remain to be the Sabbath, and the worship of God on the Saturday is what fulfills the Ten Commandments, as opposed to how Roman Catholics, namely us, have shifted the Lord's Day from the Saturday to the Sunday. I'll just give you one proof text that they supply. I'll respond to their proof text. Then I'll make another point about the Sabbath observance that I didn't mention last week. So one of their proof texts is the following. They ask this question. So supposedly this is a Catholic asking this question. But didn't the Apostle Paul always meet with the early Christians on Sunday in honour of the resurrection? What was his manner in regards to a day of worship? And their response is, "And Paul, as his manner was, went unto them, and 3 Sabbath days reasoned with them and out of the Scriptures." That's Acts 17:2. And then they quote Acts 18:4. "And he reasoned in the synagogue every Sabbath, and persuaded the Jews and the Greeks." So basically what the Seventh-day Adventists say here is that St. Paul, as a Christian, as an apostle, did traditional Sabbath observance. That he came to worship God on the Saturday, the Jewish Sabbath. There we have it. 3 times in one quote, and another occasion in another quote. So what St. Paul does should be the model for all Christians. And hence the Seventh-day Adventists have it right. The Sabbath should never have been moved from the Saturday, the last day of the week, to the Sunday, which is the first day of the week. Well, my first response is that how can a Christian, namely St. Paul, be fulfilling his obligations as a Christian to worship God on the Sabbath in a Jewish synagogue? To be worshipping with Jews who didn't believe in Jesus Christ, right, as the Son of God, as the Messiah, and that somehow fulfills the obligation to worship on the Sabbath. If St. Paul was intending to worship God on the Sabbath, he would not have been doing that with Jews who didn't believe in Jesus Christ. He would have been doing that with Christians who accepted Jesus of Nazareth as the Messiah. The simple reason why St. Paul, on these 4 occasions, as recorded in the Acts of the Apostles, is going to the synagogue is not to worship according to the law of the Sabbath, but to meet the Jews, to convince them about Jesus Christ. He knew when did they gather at these synagogues on the Sabbath day, so that's why he went to meet them on the Sabbath day. It's as simple as that. And on other occasions we read in the Acts of the Apostles, he's breaking the bread with Christians on the first day of the week. So that's my response to that particular misuse of those verses as proof text. And they've got another 8 or 9 here, but I'm not going to spend the next hour dealing with that. But I'll just make this last point about changing the Sabbath. With Sabbath observance, with this commandment, there's 2 aspects of law here. There's ceremonial law and there's natural law. What do I mean by that? What's the distinction? The natural law here that we're fulfilling with worshipping God is the law that commands us as creatures to acknowledge our Creator. By nature, we're creatures. And according to natural law, the creatures should acknowledge and worship their Creator. And because we're social beings, we need to do this individually, but we also need to do it collectively as a social body, united through our baptism. So when we do that as creatures, worship the Creator, our Creator, and as social beings do that privately or collectively, then we're fulfilling the natural law aspect. No one has the authority to change that aspect of the law, the natural law aspect of Sabbath observance, or worshipping together publicly. What can be changed is the ceremonial aspect. It doesn't matter neither here nor there what day of the week we do that. That aspect, ceremonial law, can be changed. So even though we don't read it anywhere in Scripture, someone somewhere at some time said, for Christians, ceremoniously, we will change the day on which we gather together to publicly worship God, and we'll change it to the first day of the week to acknowledge the new and eternal covenant, the new creation. Okay? Now, I'm presuming that that was at least an apostolic decision, that the apostles themselves put that into place. I dare say it could have been Jesus Christ himself who might have told them to do that, but we have no evidence of that specifically. One thing is an absolute fact, without any doubt whatsoever. The earliest Christians, the sub-apostolic Christians that we know of, like St. Ignatius of Antioch, St. Polycarp. What I mean by sub-apostolic, Christian leaders, bishops, as these two men were, Bishop of Antioch, Bishop of Smyrna in Asia Minor, they were both in contact with apostles. St. Peter, St. John, for example, they were taught by apostles. That's what we mean by sub-apostolic, under the apostles. They no doubt in their writings, particularly St. Ignatius and others like St. Justin Martyr in the mid-2nd century, make it very clear that Christians gather together and worship on the Sunday. So someone before them authorized the change to gather on the Sunday. But realistically, as Christians, as Catholics, we don't worship God just one day a week. Every day is holy. In the era of the age of grace that we now live in, every day is holy. And so there are people who go to Mass and worship God publicly every day. And of course, the church law, as the church has the authority to make this law, then designates that we must go at least once a week and makes that the Sunday. So there's a change in the ceremonial aspect, something that can be changed, but we are not changing the natural law aspect, meaning that we should worship God and we should do that publicly and collectively. All right, so I'll finish. That wraps up from last week. So we'll now go to chapter 3, and we read here, again he entered the synagogue, and a man was there who had a withered hand. And they watched him to see whether he would heal him on the Sabbath, so that they might accuse him. So they're looking, okay, they have evil intent here. They want to shoot down Jesus Christ. Is he a lawbreaker? Okay? The Greek would be anomos, without law, a man without law, a lawbreaker. Is he going to do something prohibited? Doing work of healing, like medical work, was considered a prohibited work on the Sabbath. But Jesus, knowing their hearts, right, is going to reconstitute the debate with a question that throws them off guard. Come here, and he said to them, is it lawful on the Sabbath to do good or to do harm, to save life or to kill? Now, that's not the question that the Pharisees, the scribes, or the Sadducees, or anyone else who had scholarship would have been asking about Sabbath observance. Their question would have been, their statement or belief would have been, we need to rest on the Sabbath and do no work on the Sabbath and simply worship God on the Sabbath. Jesus has rephrased the question, and he's rephrased it in this way that the scholars of the particular rabbinical schools were debating. In that time, there were rabbinical schools. And the adherents to each particular school debated questions like this. So Jesus is modeling himself now to be a debater of the type that was usual in these rabbinical schools. So two of the schools was Shammai was one school and Hillel was the other school. And Shammai was traditionally the more stricter school when it came to observance, and Hillel was the little bit more liberal school. But Jesus hasn't phrased the question as to what whether we should be resting or not on the Sabbath, but whether we should be doing good or harm on the Sabbath, to save life or to kill. So Jesus is saying really implicitly here that the law of the Sabbath there can be exemptions for necessity or mercy. And if we're needing to do good and save life, and that involves work, then that will always override the law to be resting. Because remember, the Sabbath is made for our benefit, and the Sabbath observance should never be observed in a way that allows life to be threatened, or prevents us from meeting our necessities, or prevents us from being merciful or doing good. But they were silent. And here they're showing their hypocrisy. They're pretending not to have an answer. But they do have an answer, but they won't give their answer because their answer would expose them to the common people Jesus was winning the support of the common people as against these scribes and Pharisees. They stayed silent and preferred to stay silent rather than say, we should do nothing. We should abstain from all work. And he looked around them with anger. This is one of the few occasions that we see Jesus behaving in this way. Grieved at their hardness of heart. And then he said to the man, "Stretch out your hand." He stretched it out, and his hand was restored. Now, remember something I said last week. Why is Jesus doing these type of miracles? One, to gain credibility with regards to his claim to be the Messiah. But also, what are the essential core components of the mission of the Messiah? To rescue humanity from the dominion of the devil and the consequences of original sin. And one of the consequences of original sin was that we fell into pain, sickness, suffering, decrepitude, because we lost these gifts that we had originally. They're called preternatural gifts. The word preta in Greek means something that extends our nature, that makes us go beyond nature. This is as distinct from supernatural. So a bit of theology here. A supernatural gift raises us up to another level of nature, a participation in God's own divine nature. That's 1 Peter. You read that in I think it's 1 Peter 4, it's in 1 Peter, I forget which chapter, 1 to 5. So we have a creative participation in God's own divine nature. That's a supernatural gift. Preternatural gifts are meant to perfect us in our life on earth, to make us completely happy on earth. And we had those originally before original sin. But when we committed original sin, we were stripped of those gifts. So we were subject now to pain, sickness, suffering, decrepitude, and ultimately death. And Jesus conquers all that for us, and that will be completely conquered at the general resurrection. When we say that in the Creed, we believe in the resurrection of the body and life everlasting. That's the final down payment of the benefits of Christ's cross for each and every one of us. But in the interim, Jesus is showing as the Messiah that he can and will give instances where he liberates us from the consequences of sin. Now, he does this, and what's the response of his enemies? The Pharisees went out and immediately held counsel with who? Who did they begin to, form a scrum with? With the Herodians against him, how to destroy him. Now, there's an enormous irony here, because the Pharisee meaning separated one, is a person who believes we need to keep our distance and to be separated from all pagan or Gentile influence, which has desecrated, poisoned, corrupted Israel, the Israelites. And the only way to be free to be redeemed from Roman domination is to observe the law in its minutiae. And therefore we don't associate with the Gentile, the pagan. But the Herodians were exactly those type of people. The Herodians are the supporters. They were few, they were a minority, and they weren't popular, but they were that faction in ancient Israel that supported the Herodian dynasty. And what was wrong with the Herodian dynasty? Who were they and what was wrong with them from the Jewish perspective? There were 5 significant Herodians from our perspective. The first one was Antipater, back in the days of around 50 to 40 BC. And he gained the favour of the Romans because he supported Julius Caesar when he was in Egypt with Cleopatra. And there was an uprising, and Antipater brought his forces to support Julius Caesar. The son of Antipater was Herod the Great, the one we know who was the puppet king in the time when Jesus was born, and who sought to destroy destroy the Messiah and failed to do that. Now, the Herodians were put into power by the Romans because the Romans wanted some type of Jewish intermediary government between them and the Jews, because they knew the Jews were very antagonistic to foreign rule, and the Romans were pragmatic at times, and they thought, well, let's have a ruler to rule on our behalf in this part of the world that will somehow appease the Jewish hostility. But they chose the wrong people, because the Herodians were not Jews. The Herodians were from Edom, or the name of that province at the time was Idumea. Idumea is southeast of the Dead Sea, and Edom, the Edomites, were the descendants of Esau, the brother of Jacob, the twin sons of Isaac. And so the Edomites were cousins of the Israelites, but they were not worshipped. They were, of course, in antagonism and fell into all sorts of paganisms and errors, etc., idolatries. And so were despised by the Israelites and later the Jews. But the Herodians adopted Jewish religion. But that still did not please the purists. And after Herod the Great, we have Herod Antipas, of course the famous Herod who's in power in Galilee and Perea, those 2 northern provinces at the time when Jesus is an adult and publicly ministering, etc. And he's the third one, and after him is Herod Agrippa I, who we read about in the Acts of the Apostles, and who dies when he's standing in this glittering garment before the people from Tyre and berating those from Tyre, and they're saying, this man is a god, and he gets smacked down by an angel and dies. And then there's his son, Herod Agrippa II, who's the last of the Herodians, and he's the Herod Agrippa we read in Acts 26 that St. Paul preaches in front of before he appeals to Caesar. And he's the last of the Herodians before the Jewish War of AD 66 to 70, which saw the end of the Herodians, and then the Romans then administered those provinces directly themselves. They reconstructed the territories politically after the Jewish War. Now, this is the irony. The Pharisees will ally with people they naturally hate and naturally are enemies. Because basically, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. And the Herodians didn't like Jesus. We don't like Jesus. So we'll ally ourselves with the Herodians to gang up against this Jesus who's a pain for both of us. It's the same as what we would see later on. When Jesus is arrested and put on trial. Pilate and Herod, hitherto enemies, were now friends when it came to opposing Jesus. Just one last point on that. There are various factions in these Judea and Samaria and Galilee at the time, and I'll just give you a brief rundown of the who's who. You hear about Sadducees. And Sadducees are the priestly caste. And you have later on St. Paul playing the Sadducees off against the Pharisees. The Pharisees were not priests. The priests were the Sadducees. The faction of the Sadducees were formed in 167 BC. They were rich, they were aristocratic, they loved their wealth, and they called themselves Sadducees after Zadok, who was the first priest of the first temple era back in the days of David and Solomon. So Sadducees from Zadok, or Zadok. They were hardliners in one sense. They didn't accept oral tradition. They only accepted the written scriptures. They rejected concepts like angels, belief in angels. They rejected the resurrection of the body. Okay, but they also dangled with Hellenism. And Hellenism means they adopted some of the Greek cultural aspects, because after Alexander the Great conquered that part of the world, Hellenism came in. Greek culture, Greek religion, Greek democracy, the Greek politics, Greek culture, religion, I said all those things, philosophy, etc. And that was deleterious to the purity of Judean society. And that's why we had the Maccabean Wars in the 2nd century BC. Because the remnant kingdoms after Alexander the Great, particularly the Seleucid kingdom, which was a Hellenistic kingdom, basically think of Syria today, and that was Hellenistic under the Seleucids, and it's seeking to impose Hellenism upon the Jews in the 2nd century BC. And then you have the revolt of the Maccabees against that. And it was a glorious and victorious revolt against them. Okay, the Pharisees were founded roughly the same time in the mid-2nd century. As I said, they're the separated ones. They are laymen. They're not priests. So when you hear about Caiaphas and Annas as central figures opposing Jesus, they're not priests. Sorry, they're not Pharisees. Caiaphas and Annas were high priests, father-in-law and son-in-law. Okay, it was often kept in the family and handed down to the next of kin in that family. But they were not Pharisees. They were Sadducees. But the Pharisees were scholars and strict observers of the law. And they accepted the written scriptures and they accepted oral traditions. And they were popular with the ordinary people and the lower clergy. We've heard of scribes. Now, scribes could be priests, laymen, Pharisees, or Sadducees, and they were intellectuals, they were scholars, they were copiers, they were teachers, they were interpreters. And as we'll see, and you know, they were also very hostile to Jesus. The Essenes are relevant here because we know that John the Baptist had some association with the Essene community. They were a reformist movement who rejected the corruption of factions and power and authority in Jerusalem. And they were formed around the mid-2nd century as well. And they were like monks. They were celibates. They lived in community. They lived under a rule. They engaged in work, labour, prayer, study, writing. That's why we have the Dead Sea Scrolls. They had a library which they compiled over hundreds of years. They were also apocalyptic. They were waiting for a Messiah who was going to come, as I said last week, this glorious, kingly, messianic figure who's going to go to war against the Romans. And when he appears, the Essenes will join them in the battle, which is why they disappeared after AD 70, because the Qumran community was destroyed in this uprising. If you know anything about the history of this time, the Roman legion that did most of the destruction was the 10th legion, the Fretensis legion. So they destroyed Jerusalem, the temple. They were camped on Mount Olivet in the siege against Jerusalem in AD 70. They also destroyed Qumran, they destroyed Masada, they destroyed Machaerus. So if you're a Jew who's very sympathetic to that period of their history, you wouldn't like the 10th Legion, because they did most of the devastation of the Jews in this war. You've got the Zealots and the Sicarii. The Zealots were derived from the Pharisees, and they were the hard, sorry for the pun, the cutting edge. They believed in military and violent action to cast the Romans out. So they were engaged in assassinations. They weren't called Sicarii for nothing. They weren't using their knives just to make hummus sandwiches or whatever, all right? They would knife their enemies. And we'll come across the zealots again because there's a belief that one of the 12 apostles, Simon was a zealot. But there's a bit of, we'll look at the different options there in a little while. The other faction, the Samaritans, and you don't hear much good about the Samaritans, but you do hear Jesus talking about the Good Samaritan. And because he talked about the Good Samaritan, that made him very controversial. Because the Samaritans were despised. They were a hybrid community. They were Jews who intermarried with pagans, who were put into that part of the world, what we would call Samaria, that's that region between Galilee and Judea, by the Assyrians. When the Assyrians came and destroyed the northern kingdom in 722 BC, they engaged in ethnic cleansing. They would uproot the defeated peoples, and they took the majority of the 10 tribes and they cast them to the other side of the Euphrates River, never to be heard of again. And then they'll pull out another dominated people, and they'll put those people into the place of those 10 tribes, and they planted them in that part of the world. And those people would intermarry with the remnant Jews, Israelites that stayed in that area, and they formed the Samaritans. So the Samaritans, they actually were despised because they were mixed blood. They weren't pure race. But they had the Torah, they accepted the first 5 books of the Old Testament. And another reason why they were highly despised was because they would have their own temple on Mount Gerizim. And they would sacrifice in that temple. And this was horrid to faithful Jews because there's only one place to sacrifice, and that's on the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. And why is that what was originally Mount Moriah, and why is that the only place for sacrifice? Because that's where Abraham was going to sacrifice Isaac. So no other place can there be sacrifice for the Jews. Not in the synagogues, not anywhere else in the world. Okay, so synagogues that we read about in the scriptures here in the Gospels, Jesus going to synagogues, St. Paul going to synagogues, that's a post-Babylonian captivity development. So when the Jews come back from the Babylonian captivity at the end of the 6th century BC, so that's from about 515 BC onwards, then the Jews set up this new network of synagogues. And as we said last week, they're assembly places. It's a Greek word for people coming together in assembly. And it's like our parish system. The Jews would go to synagogues to pray privately and collectively and sing the Psalms and read the scriptures and hear commentary on the scriptures, but they never sacrificed in the synagogues. Never. But that's what the horrible thing the Samaritans did. They had sacrifice in a rebellious temple, not the holy temple in Jerusalem. And actually, Pontius Pilate lost his job because he massacred Samaritans on Mount Gerizim. And Tiberius, the emperor, hearing of this, because the Romans were, despite their brutalities at times, they were very law-abiding. They believed in law and order and justice and etc. And Tiberius considered that Pontius Pilate had overstepped the mark with this massacre and pulled him out. He lost his job, pulled him out of Judea, and the tradition tells us he goes back to Rome, but beforehand he commits suicide. And the last category are the people of the land, the ordinary agricultural people who were uneducated, pretty rustic, and the elite despised them as accursed. You see that on one occasion when Jesus heals this blind man, and the blind man is trying to give an account for who he thinks Jesus is. And he says to the Pharisees, but he must be from God. How could he do a miracle unless he was from God? And the Pharisees respond, who are you to give us a lesson? You steeped in sin since birth. Steeped in sin since birth. So here was an example of one of the ordinary people of the land that the elite intellectuals and the power brokers in Jerusalem despised. And that was another horrid aspect of their so-called spirituality. All right, now we'll move on to verse 7. Jesus withdrew with his disciples to the sea, and a great multitude from Galilee followed. Now this is the Sea of Galilee, or Lake Tiberias, or Lake Gennesaret. They're three different names for the same sea. Also from Judea, and from Jerusalem, and Idumea, and from beyond the Jordan, and from about Tyre and Sidon. Now, what are we seeing here? A great multitude, hearing all that he did, came to him. This is the beginning of the universal church. Okay? Now, Idumea, I already mentioned Idumea. That was Edom. This is where the Herodians came from. This is the only place in the Gospels we hear of Idumea. These are not Jews coming to hear Jesus. This is Jews and Gentiles, Jews and pagans coming to hear Jesus. Of course, Idumea is to the southeast of Jerusalem. Beyond the Jordan are those other territories to the east of the Jordan River. So you've got Edom, you've got Moab, you've got Ammon, and you've got Gilead, which in the time of the first century is called Perea. And these territories were all originally under the domination of David and Solomon 1,000 years earlier. So the kingdom of David and Solomon, the first Davidic kings, were a prefigurement of the Messianic kingdom, which would have dominion over Jews, Israelites, and non-Israelites. Tyre and Sidon, of course, they're the Phoenicians. Tyre was the capital city, the most prominent city of the Phoenician trading cities, and their religion, well, they are Canaanites. They are Baal worshippers. And this was the hideous religion that infected the northern kingdom of Israel and eventually saw its downfall. And if you know anything about the prophet Elijah and his mission, when you read the book of Kings, chapter 18, who was Elijah fighting? The Baal worshippers. And now these are the Baal worshippers, well, the cities which were predominantly Baal worshippers, coming to hear about Jesus. A great multitude. And he told his disciples to have a boat ready for him because of the crowd, lest they should crush him. Now this is the contrast, Jesus' popularity with the ordinary people who have still a relatively preserved instinct for recognizing what was good. Because they weren't blinded by the intellectual pride and arrogance that the Pharisees and the Sadducees possessed. That blinded them. They resented Jesus being popular, and they resented Jesus correcting them, because you're uneducated. You know, you're from Nazareth. It's like someone in Melbourne saying, like, you're from you're from Townsville. Like, how does Townsville compare to Sydney and Melbourne, the big smoke? So that's one reason. Another reason why they resented Jesus and his rebukes. And for he had healed many, so that all who had diseases pressed upon him to touch him. It's very sacramental, in a sense. And they are right to believe that. Touch Jesus, a physical touch, and we're healed. But we know Jesus would heal without touching. Jesus would heal just through his word. I say to you, arise. Lazarus, come forth. 2 examples. But he'll also heal on other occasions by spitting and making mud with the clay and applying it to the blind man's eyes. Once, then twice. Why does Jesus do that? Why does Jesus sometimes heal like the hemorrhaging woman? She's fighting her way through the crowd. She's got this terrible affliction for years. And she says, all I need to do is touch the hem of his garment and I'll be healed. And she does touch him. And Jesus feels the power leaving from him. We don't have Jesus, no indication that he's speaking to heal her or willing to heal her immediately, expressly. But he stops and he says, who touched me? Everyone's silent. I felt the power leave me. And then the woman's terrified and admits, I touched you. So it's legitimate for these people to think if we just touch Jesus, we're healed. It's a form of sacramentalism. How grace is conveyed to us through physical material means. Something which is very Catholic. something which traditional Protestantism tends to abhor or shy away from, a disbelief that you can convey spiritual realities or grace through material things. And we will revisit this because it is this same Jesus who will take the most common elements of the society of that time, like bread, wine, water, oil. If you know anything about the Middle East, you know anything about this ancient world, these were the most fundamental staples. Bread, water, oil, wine. And he'll make them into vehicles of grace. And you're beginning to think, hey, we use those things in things called sacraments as instruments to convey God's grace to us. And whenever the unclean spirits saw him, they fell down before him and cried out. So I read this and thought, well, how can spirits bow down? And whenever the unclean spirits saw him, they fell down before him. It's not the spirits that are being seen to be bowing down. What that means, it's the people who are possessed with the spirits are bowing down. There's a compulsion there. In the presence of the Lord, they are compelled to bow down. And they cried out, "You are the Son of God." And he strictly ordered them not to make him known. Now, hold on. Where did we hear this last time? Back in chapter 1, verse 24. I know who you are, the Holy One of God. And we said last week, what was the knowledge of the demons here, of the unclean spirits? How much did they know about Jesus? One, he's the Holy One of God. Does that mean they knew he was God in human form? Now the unclean spirits are saying, they fell down before him. You are the Son of God. This raises it to the next level. What does Son of God mean? If I asked you, what does Son of God mean? You'll give me a very Catholic answer. Oh, Son of God. Well, son, I'm not being flippant here. Son of human is human. Son of dog is dog. Son of cat is cat. Son of God is God. So do the demons now admit, are they revealing here that they know that Jesus of Nazareth is God in human form? I would still say, I don't know. I would say they're getting closer. Because there's plenty of holy ones of God, but there's only one Son of God. But again, what does Son of God mean? Does Son of God mean God the Son? It's a matter for debate. I'm open to hear the evidence. Now I've already looked forward to next week's one, and there's another statement by unclean spirits that take us even closer to the idea, did they know that Jesus was God in human form? And he strictly ordered them not to make him known. Now we hear that again. Messianic secret. Keep it secret. And we just revisit the reasons why he doesn't want it to be known for those who are here for the first time. One, because we said last week, he didn't want to be known just as a miracle worker or someone who performed magic tricks and known just for that and followed just for that. He didn't want to aggravate the authorities prematurely who would react and come down on him before his time was due. But also there was that point about, if you're going to reveal now to the crowds that I am the Messiah, then they're going to act precipitously. They're going to grab me, they're going to hoist me on their shoulders, and they're going to expect me to go to war and cast out the Romans here and now, when that's not his true mission. Jesus appoints the 12. Luke's gospel gives us more information than Mark's gospel here. Luke tells us that before Jesus appoints the 12, he spends the whole night in prayer. That's an incredible vigil, whole night in prayer. Then someone else, there's proof he's not God. If he's God, who is he praying to? Why does he need to pray to himself? Jesus spends didn't Jesus know who he's going to choose? Is this Jesus trying to work it out? He wasn't sure who, and he needed to pray all night to find out who to choose. This is Jesus being the exemplar for us. As truly human, in his humanity, he is a creature. And the creature must worship the Creator. So Jesus, in his human intellect, must know the true God. And in his human will, must love the true God. And in his body, in his posture, in his kneeling, in his prayer, he will show that worship. Does Jesus need to pray all night to know who he's going to choose? No. He's been the exemplar, setting a model for us, because Christians in the future will need to learn to pray, and pray sometimes all night. And we have that good tradition in the Catholic Church of vigils and all-night vigils, etc. Jesus sets it. It's not, Mark doesn't mention it. Luke mentions it. He went, I'm looking at verse 13, and he went up into the hills. So he's going in isolation here, a nice retreat, and he called to him those whom he desired, and they came to him. So he's calling them after he's prayed all night, which Luke mentions, as I said. And he appointed 12. And we know why 12, don't we? You should know now why 12. It's not a random number. Shouldn't he have been decimal based and keep it at 10? You know, it's more simple, you know. 12 is because he's restoring the visible kingdom of God in the world. 12 sons of Jacob, the original Israel, is going to be the new Israel, the new people of God, and it's going to be reconstituted now, but without ethnic or geographical or any other boundaries. It's going to be the universal Israel. That is the Catholic Israel, because Catholic means universal. And to be with him and to be sent out to preach and have authority to cast out demons. Christ is now beginning the work of establishing his apostolic college, if you want to use that word. He wouldn't have used that word. But he's now beginning to set up those men with that power and authority who will, after he's ascended back into heaven, to continue the work he was doing. At this stage, it's preach and cast out demons. Later on, it will be do this in commemoration of me. Later on, it will be go baptize all nations, make disciples of all nations, baptizing them. Later on, it will be whose sins you shall forgive, they are forgiven them. Jesus will build up these disciples, these to be apostles, who will be authorized and empowered to continue the work he was doing in the world. So Jesus ascends into heaven, but Jesus is still on earth. And where is he on earth? He is where his body is. That's the church, doing what he did on earth. But notice here, these men are sent out with authority, exousia in Greek, authority. Who has the authority to send out? God does. So we listen to the authorized, those who are sent out. We don't listen to the unauthorized who send themselves out. And they are, sorry for being harsh here, they are the false prophets. False prophets are unauthorized who send themselves out. Sorry to say it, but these people are unauthorized who send themselves out. And they get adherents because we have a crisis in faith. If Catholics join a sect like this, founded in the 1840s in the United States, is because we are not catechizing our people adequately. And our people don't know our scriptures well enough to guard themselves against this type of proselytism. This group, they might claim that one of their founders, Ellen Gould White, was a prophetess, but she has no link to the authority that we can see on earth and recognize. And how? What is that authority that's visible in the world that we can see and recognize and know with certainty has authority? It's those who are successors to the apostles. So you can read St. Clement of Rome writing in the late 1st century about apostolic succession, about how God the Father sends Jesus, Jesus sends the apostles send their successors, for example, Paul, Barnabas. Paul is sending Titus and Timothy Okay, and we see there one generation after another, and by the end of the 1st century, Clement of Rome is speaking about how that succession has come to his time, and it's going to continue with others being ordained through the laying on of hands. So we look for those who have their hands laid on them by what we call now the episcopoi, the bishops, and we can trace that all backwards to the original 12. And we can do that with the See of Rome, and we can do that with many other sees. I read Eusebius a few months ago, and one of the principal purposes of his history is to show the succession of bishops in these major cities: Antioch, Jerusalem, Alexandria, Rome, going back to the original apostles who founded those churches. That's the guarantee of where the authority is from the time of Christ, continuing to now until the end of the world. Now, who are the 12? Simon, whom he surnamed Peter, James the son of Zebedee, and John the brother of James, who he surnamed Boanerges, that is, sons of thunder, Andrew and Philip, and Bartholomew and Matthew, and Thomas and James the son of Alphaeus, and Thaddeus, and Simon the Canaanian, and Judas Iscariot who betrayed him. This is one list of the apostles. Who's first in this list? Simon Peter. Who's last? Why is he last? Because he's the betrayer. It's not an accident that he's last. There are 4 lists of the apostles in the New Testament. Matthew 10, 2-4. Mark 3, 16-19, Luke 6, 14-16, Acts 1, 13. All 4 lists put Simon Peter first. Simon Peter, Simon Peter, Simon Peter, Peter. Who's last in all 4 lists? Judas Iscariot, Judas Iscariot, Judas Iscariot, etc. It's not a coincidence. Now, all the other apostles are not in the same order except for Philip, who's number 5 in all 4 lists, and James, son of Alphaeus, who we'll return to, James, son of Alphaeus, if you remember that. He's number 9 in all 4 lists. But it's no coincidence with Peter that he's first. Why is he first? We saw last week Andrew, his brother, is older. It is completely contrary to the culture to list a younger brother ahead of an older brother. So why is Simon always listed ahead of Andrew? Because the Lord has changed the precedence, the natural order to a supernatural order of precedence. Now, people can look at this and say, that's okay, I'll accept that. Peter is first, he's the first among equals, but that's it. But what does first among equals mean? So what's the consequence of being first among equals? What comes with that? Oh, we bow down to him more than we bow down to the others. No. We greet him with a more distinct title than the others. No, it's more than that. The precedence has a empowerment and a greater authority. We don't read it here. This is where we read it. Matthew 16, 18 onwards. You are Peter, and on this rock I'll build my church. The gates of hell will not prevail against it. And I'll give to you, in singular in the Greek, the keys of the kingdom of heaven. Whatever you bind on earth is bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth is loosed in heaven. What a power. It resembles what we read in Isaiah 22:22, where Eliakim is given the keys as the vizier to the king of his time, by the king of his time. The king is Jesus, and he has a prime minister. And in the time of Isaiah, it was Eliakim, and in here, in the New Testament era of grace, the new Israel, it's Simon. In chapter 18 of Matthew, you get the other apostles being given power to bind and loose, and they have that, but they're not given the keys. Jesus only gives St. Peter specifically the keys. And then we got Luke 22:31. Simon, Simon, Satan has sought to sift you as wheat, but I have prayed for you, in the singular, you, that your faith will fail not. And when you have returned to me, strengthen your brethren. So after you've repented of your sin of denying me, I pray that your faith will fail not. You have the responsibility to strengthen your brothers. That's the other disciples, the other apostles. And then we go to John 21:15 onwards. This is post-resurrection. So pre-resurrection, you are Simon, on this rock I'll build my church. When does he do it? Post-resurrection. Simon, do you love me more than the others? Yes, Lord, you know that I love you. And he asked him that question 3 times because he denied Jesus 3 times. So Simon Peter's sorry for that, but our Lord is going to make him do a public, out of an act of honour, public reparation for that denial, that triple denial with a triple affirmation. Simon, do you love me more than the others? Yes, Lord, you know that I love you 3 times. Feed my lambs, feed my sheep, feed my sheep. So the Good Shepherd Jesus is making Simon Peter the chief shepherd on earth, getting him prepared to be the chief shepherd on earth after he ascends into heaven. The imagery of shepherd is overwhelming here. Jesus is a good shepherd, is telling Simon Peter, feed my lambs, feed my sheep, feed my sheep. So why the distinction between lambs and sheep? Because you're going to feed everyone in the church, great and small. So that's what comes with being listed first and being the first among equals. It's not as honorific, it is actually substantive. There will be power and authority that goes with that. And the history of the church attests to that's passed on in succession to now the 266th Bishop of Rome. And why Rome? Because that's where St. Peter goes. So he's the first Bishop of Rome, and his successors inherit this power and authority that the Lord Jesus gives to Simon Peter. All right, I'm noting the time. Jesus and Beelzebub. Then he went home. Now this is a very controversial passage because it's translated differently by different scholars. Then he went home. Jesus went home, and the crowd came together again, that is, followed Jesus. So they could not even eat. So Jesus and the disciples can't eat. The crowd keeps following them. And when his friends heard it, that is, Jesus' friends heard the crowd, they went out to seize him. Seize who? Seize. This is why it's confusing. For they said he is beside himself. Jesus is beside himself. The Greek word is, we get the English word ecstasy from the Greek word here. Ecstasy. The Greek word is ecstasy. And that's ecstasy in English. Some Bibles translate it as he has gone mad. This one translates it as he is beside himself. But I contend with some other ancient Western manuscripts of St. Mark's Gospel, it really means this. Then he went home, Jesus went home, and the crowd came together again following Jesus so that they could not even eat. Jesus and the disciples couldn't eat. The crowd's bothering them still. And when his friends heard it, that is, heard the crowd outside, they went out to the crowd to control the crowd. For that, the disciples said, the crowd has gone mad. Or the crowd, I prefer this interpretation. The crowd has gone mad. They've just seen what Jesus has done and they want to see more of it, and they won't even give Jesus and the disciples any rest. Okay, we want more of what he's been doing. And the scribes who came down from Jerusalem said, he is possessed by Beelzebub. He is possessed by the great demon. Beelzebub means Lord of the Flies. The Jews, this is a god of the city of Ekron, which was a city of Philistines and Canaanites. So it's a Baalic divinity, Lord of Baal, Lord of the Flies. And the Jews took that title to apply it to Satan. And now the accusation is, this Jesus is really casting out demons. They're not denying he's casting out demons, but you're not doing it by God's power. You're doing it by the power of this chief demon. Because the Jews had in their theology the belief that greater demons had the power to cast out lesser demons. And that's what's happening really here, guys. This is not a man from God. He's using the power of the superior demon Beelzebub to cast out weaker demons. And he called them to him and he said to them in parables. So Jesus will respond here. Parable means comparison. Okay, it's telling a story using comparisons to make a point through comparisons. Now, this is silly. What Jesus basically, to paraphrase Jesus here, saying, you're speaking nonsense. If I'm under the power of Satan, casting out little satans, little demons, then the kingdom of Satan is in civil war. Demon casting out demons, and this kingdom cannot stand. So what you're making is not making no sense, what you're alleging here. What Jesus then says, what's really happening here is not the demons at civil war with each other. Verse 27, but no one can enter a strong man's house and plunder his goods. The strong man's house is the person possessed by the demon. The strong man is the demon possessing someone. Jesus is coming in to plunder that house, meaning Jesus is coming to cast the demon out of the possessed. Unless he first binds the strong man, I am coming with God's power to bind the strong man and cast out the demon. And then indeed he may plunder his house. Jesus is saying here, what's really happening? I'm doing this by the power of God, not the power of Beelzebub. There's no civil war going on here. There is a war, but I've declared war on the demonic kingdom, and I'm going to plunder the demon's house, and I'm going to purify those houses possessed and owned by the demons. Truly I say to you, all sins will be forgiven the sons of men, and whatever blasphemies they utter. But whoever blasphemes against the Holy Spirit never has forgiveness, but is guilty of an eternal sin. For they had said, he is an unclean spirit. Now Jesus here hurls a gigantic accusation back at his critics. You blaspheme. Because you are attributing a good work that is done by the power of God, and you are falsely attributing that to the devil. That's the blasphemy. But you are guilty of an eternal sin. What's this mean? All sins, aren't they forgivable? Yes, all sins are forgivable. No sin is beyond the mercy and forgiveness of God. So what does Jesus here mean when he says eternal sin or unforgivable sin? Why is it an unforgivable sin? Because these critics of Jesus are resisting the known truth. And they will be unrepentant of that. So you're in bad spirit if you know the truth and you don't embrace it. You are never forgiven if you remain obstinate in sin and refuse to repent. That's the unforgivable sin. All right, I'm looking at the time. We'll break now to 8:30 and I'll finish this chapter 3 and chapter 4 in the second hour. Thank you. I got one question here about the Jews following the lunar calendar. Which they do. Explain the change to solar time. I'll deal with this. The Jews do have a lunar calendar, but the interesting thing is that every 3 years they have you know how we have a leap year, we add an extra day. They have a leap month every third year. They normally, I'll get this right, they normally have 12 months in the year, but every 3 years they have 13 months in the year. They add a lunar month. The reason for that is to keep the Passover festival in springtime. For your information, if you're asking questions about why we have different Catholic and Orthodox Easter dates, the Orthodox Easter is this Sunday because it's let's go back to the Council of Nicaea, which determined the process by which Christians should have a united Easter celebration. Easter Sunday should be the first Sunday after the first full moon after the vernal equinox. That means the first Sunday after the first full moon after March 21. But in 1583, the Catholic Church went to the Gregorian calendar as a more accurate calculation of the year. But England and Sweden did not adopt the Gregorian calendar until 1752 and 1753 respectively. The Orthodox, in their liturgical calendar, have not adopted the Gregorian calendar. So when the Catholic Church went to the Gregorian calendar in 1583, they had to skip forward 10 days. So imagine the 5th of October, the next day became the 15th of October. But every 400 years, the gap between the Gregorian and the Julian calendar is extended 3 days. So now the gap between the Gregorian and the Julian calendar is 14 days. What does that mean? When we have the vernal equinox on March 21 in the Gregorian calendar, it's March 7 in the Julian calendar. So when the Orthodox don't have March 21 in their calendar until the 4th of April in our calendar. So for them, they're working out which Sunday after which full moon. For us, it's the first full moon in our calendar after March 21, which is their March 7. For them, it's the first full moon in their calendar after March 21, which is April 4. And they're not the same full moon, which is why we had a full moon last night, which is the first full moon after April 4, which is March 21 in the Julian calendar. And that's why they've got their Easter Sunday this Sunday. So we're both following the Council of Nicaea, but I have to say this, the Julian calendar is not mathematically, astronomically correct. It's the Gregorian calendar. And I've given you enough information to confuse you already, so I won't give you any more. But that took me many years to work out, by the way, but that's the basic situation there. Now we're still chapter 3, verse 31. And his mother and his brethren came, and standing outside they sent to him and called him, and a crowd was sitting about him, and they said to him, "Your mother and brethren are outside asking for you." And he replied, "Who are my mother and my brethren?" And looking around on those who sat about him, he said, "Here are my mother and my brethren. Whoever does the will of God is my brother and sister and mother." So what's happening here? Is it true that Jesus is downplaying the significance of his own mother, that is Mary, mother of Jesus, and his brethren, which are his brothers, and saying that they're not my real mother and brethren? My real mother and brethren are those who do the will of God? It's not that. He's extending his family. His true family is the spiritual family. Those who do the will of God are his mother and brothers and sisters. And of course the Virgin Mary was one of those. And we say the most preeminent of those. But what about this brethren? The brothers of Jesus? They're travelling with Mary. So it's quite clear that they must be the children of Mary if they're the brothers of Jesus. And we get this elaborated in Matthew 13, verses 55 to 56. Aren't his brothers James, Joseph, Jude and Simon, and his sisters? And this plagued me terribly in 1980 when I'm at an inter-school Christian fellowship gathering at school. And I'm just distracted and I'm flicking through the Good News for Modern Man Bible, English translation 1974. And I come across this passage naming the brothers of Jesus, and I got my friend Elias who's telling me that Mary's a perpetual virgin before, during and after giving birth to Jesus, and that's a Catholic dogma. It is a Catholic dogma. Council of Lateran AD 649 Canon 3 says Mary is a perpetual virgin. So I'm a 16-year-old reading this and panicking, thinking the Catholic Church is wrong. What explanation can it possibly have? Here it is in Matthew, James, Joseph, Jude and Simon. And here we have in Mark 3, the brothers, the brethren of Jesus. The Catholic Church is wrong, period. So my response as a 15-year-old was to abandon any Marian prayers or anything. A logical response, but I never said another Hail Mary for 6 years. And I just hung in there thinking the Catholic Church must have an answer, but it better be pretty good. Okay? I only found out the answer 10 years later. Though I never abandoned the Catholic belief in this area, I only found out the answer 10 years later when I was preparing a lesson for school. on the brothers and sisters of Jesus. And I discovered who the brothers of Jesus really were, who James, Joseph, Jude and Simon really were. And I said, basically, eureka, I'm a genius. But all I did was find out what St. Jerome found out in the 4th century when he was writing against the heretic Helvidius. And Helvidius made this claim that Mary had other children besides Jesus. Thank you. Another view is that the brothers of Jesus, and we get this from the work Proto-Evangelium of St. James, which was written mid-2nd century. You read that and it says that Joseph was an older man who was previously married and had children from a previous marriage. So that they're the brothers of Jesus. That's not the Catholic position. It might be the position of certain Orthodox churches, and you treat with respect that document, but that's not the Catholic belief. I can give you the Catholic belief. It's here in these 2 pages. Okay? I don't have the time to elaborate it in full, but this is the answer in brief. The brothers and sisters of Jesus are the children of Mary, another Mary married to Clopas, otherwise known as Alphaeus. And this Alphaeus, according to the church historian Hegesippus from the 2nd century AD, is the brother of St. Joseph, which is why John in Gospel of John chapter 19 verse 25 calls Mary the mother of Jesus the sister of Mary of Clopas, because they're sisters-in-law. And we know from these are the verses for your information to look at. The whole puzzle is solved by looking at Galatians 1:19, Mark 3:16, Matthew 10:1-2, John 19:25, all right, Mark 15:40, Jude 1:1, and the Hegesippus. And we put all that together, then we see that there is a family, Mary, married to Clopas / Alphaeus, who have children, James, Joseph, Jude and Simon. And that 2 of these, James and Jude, are apostles. James the Less and Jude Thaddeus are the children of Mary married to Alphaeus. I'm going to take a bit of a risk here. Why does Paul say in Galatians 1:19, and I saw none of the other apostles except James the Lord's brother? So when I first read that, I half panicked as well. There's an apostle named James who's the Lord's brother. So when you look at the list of the apostles, we have James, son of Zebedee, and James, son of Alphaeus. But if he's the brother of Jesus, shouldn't he be James, son of Joseph? So why is this James, an apostle, the Lord's brother? Because he's the son of Alphaeus. And Alphaeus is the brother of St. Joseph. And so that makes James and Joseph, Jude and Simon first cousins of Jesus, which fits in the general broader meaning of the word brother in these ancient Semitic languages. I'll leave it at that. If you're still not convinced, you can take this sheet off me, okay? Or you can do something better by Defend the Faith, because I've got a chapter on it, but that's all right. Okay, no publicity here, all right? Now, so Jesus here really is extending his family to incorporate his mother and those of his relatives who believe in him and all those who believe in him. We, as the baptized believers in Jesus Christ, are his brothers and sisters, and he is our brother and he is our Lord and everything that goes with that. Chapter 4, the parable of the sower. Now I read the parable in full, then I read Jesus' explanation in full, and then we'll get an understanding of the Catholic belief in what's called synergism, how God works with us, God's grace, and how we are free in our response to God's grace. 4:1. Again he began to teach beside the sea, and a very large crowd gathered about him, so that he got into a boat and sat in it on the sea. And the whole crowd was beside the sea on the land. And he taught them many things in parables. And in his teaching he said to them, listen, a sower went out to sow. Jesus is speaking of himself here. Imagine him as the sower going to sow. What does he sow? He sows his word and grace. And as he sowed, some seed fell along the path, and the birds came and devoured it. What you have to keep in mind here is the state of the soil receiving this seed. The other seed fell on rocky ground, where it had not much soil, and immediately it sprang up, since it had no depth of soil. And when the sun rose, it was scorched, and since it had no root, it withered away. Other seed fell among thorns, and the thorns grew up and choked it, and it yielded no grain. And other seeds fell into good soil, and brought forth grain, growing up and increasing and yielding 30-fold, and 60-fold, and 100-fold. And he said, he who has ears to hear, let him listen. That's the parable. What's Jesus' explanation? Verse 10. And when he was alone, now notice he gives his explanation not to the crowd. He gives the explanation just to his disciples, because for two reasons. One, they're the ones he's preparing to know all parables, to teach all parables, to be the leader of the new Israel he's founding, the church. Also, there's something strange here mystically. He knows the state of his audience. He knows how many of them are hardened in heart. He knows he's another prophet in the line of prophets who has a message for a decayed, corrupted Israel, a message that's going to be received only by a small minority and rejected by the majority. Now, Jesus does not condemn or will them to damnation. He speaks in parables because he knows if their hardness of heart, and if he speaks clearly, they will reject him. And the more they know, the more their fault, and the more their condemnation and damnation. So in this mysterious act of mercy, he disguises his teaching in a way to lessen their culpability and their ultimate punishment. Because as you know, we are judged according to what we know. He already knows their hearts, and that if he speaks without parables and more clearly, they'll just reject him, and be even more culpable and more deserving of damnation. The explanation. Those who were about him with the 12 asked him concerning the parables. Now verse 11. And he said to them, to you has been given the secret of the kingdom of God, but for those outside everything is in parables, so that they may indeed see but not perceive, and may indeed hear but not understand, lest they should turn again and be forgiven. And he said to them, do you not understand this parable? How then will you understand all the parables? The sower sows the word. Okay, this is Jesus as the ultimate prophet in the line of prophets. And these are the ones along the path where the word is sown. When they hear, Satan immediately comes and takes away the word which is sown in them. These are people who are very hardened, and they are not receptive at all of what Jesus teaches, the word. Okay. Satan takes it, which means the explanation here is that these people do not receive at all. And yes, Satan is responsible, but they are also responsible for allowing Satan to do this to them. And these in like manner are the ones sown upon the rocky ground. These are ones that receive. The first group didn't receive at all. This second group, they receive, but their reception is weak and partial, because they're shallow in their spirituality. The state of their soul, their soil, is not hardened, but weak and patchy and shallow. Who, when they hear the word, immediately receive it with joy. So they receive it. These are people who hear the word and they say yes to it. They do convert, but there's a shallowness and there's a weakness in their reception. They have no root in themselves, but endure for a while. Then when tribulation or persecution arises on account of the word, immediately they fall away. Read the history of the church. Read the history of the ancient church. Read the history of those who believed in Christ, received him, were baptized, and when the Roman persecutions came, they either died as martyrs or they became the lapsy and apostatized. And Jesus has them in mind, and all other Christians in all generations who receive, who believe, but deep down it's shallow. And it's only a partial reception. And when persecution breaks out, they fall away. You probably know people like that. Okay? We might be a person like that. We don't know until we're tested. Then the third category. So these people received, but they are not fruitful. All right? So there are those who didn't receive at all, those who received and were weak and shallow, which is why they are not fruitful. And others are the ones sown among thorns. They are those who hear the word. It's sown. Because it's sown and it grows, they've heard and they've received as well. Okay? But the cares of the world and the delight in riches and the desire for other things enter in and choke the word, and it proves unfruitful. So this third category are also people who receive, they believe, but they're also unfruitful. But for a different reason, not because they're shallow or partially received, but they let the world entangle them. We know people like that. You might have been people like that. I know people like that. Sadly, people who used to be daily rosary prayers and regular mass goers, but they let the world and its cares, whether it's sport or business or relationships or work or whatever, just choke their faith life. And it dies as a consequence. So they were sown, it was received, and it grew, but then it was choked off. So again, the third category is a second category of those who receive freely, but freely allowed their faith to be choked off. Then we have the fourth category. But those that were sown upon the good soil are the ones who hear the word, accept it, so they've heard, they've accepted, and they bear fruit. And listen to the response, some 30, some 60, some 100. What's going on here? There are these theologies out there called monergism, under the banner of monergism, meaning that God is sovereign and he dictates everything. It's based in a erroneous theology that we don't have free will. God elects those to salvation, they're the minority, and he elects those to damnation, and they're the majority. And it's God's sovereign will that determines this. We have no say in it. We don't have any cooperation in it because we don't have free will, because that was destroyed, bonded by original sin. It's an exaggerated theology of the effects of original sin. Catholic theology on original sin is that we are wounded in our will by the wound of malice, which means excessive self-love. And Christ comes with his grace to rescue us, to enlighten our intellect and move our will so that it's not a will that is locked in introverted love of ourselves above all things, but extroverted love of God above all things and our neighbour as ourselves. So we believe as Catholics that God freely calls. There's one predestination in God. He wills all to be saved and come to the knowledge of the truth. That's St. Paul 1 Timothy 2:4. Why aren't all saved? Is because we freely, according to this parable, choose not to fully or cooperate with God at all. But those who freely say yes respond in different levels of generosity. Some 30, they're good people. They're in heaven. They heard, they received, they are fruitful. So this is not a theology of justification or salvation by faith alone. This is a theology of, according to St. Paul, neither circumcision nor uncircumcision counts, but a faith that works itself out in love. And that's St. Paul in Galatians. So this parable is speaking about a faith that works itself out in love, that is fruitful. So your tree must be fruitful, but we are free in how generous we respond. So some 30, you're good, you're going to heaven. You're 60, you're better, you've got a greater place in heaven. And you're 100, you're fantastic, you're a canonized saint and you're up there at the top there in heaven. Wonderful. They're all in heaven. We're not going to be down there in the 30 rank thinking, how'd they get up there in 60 and 100? Why aren't I up there? You're not up there because you were generous, but not that generous. And your level of cooperation is up to you. Now, of course, God gives different levels of grace to different people, and that's in his mystery of election. But you might get the same grace as someone else, but you respond more generously or less generously than the other. And I encounter people who have a real problem with this. In my circles, there are people who think they're very egalitarian. We're all the same in heaven. What do you mean there are levels in heaven? This is a heresy. What do you mean we're all the same I respond, we're all the same in heaven? I'm going to have the same glories as the Virgin Mary and St. Joseph and St. John the Baptist and the apostles in heaven? I doubt it. Right? And what does St. Paul mean when he says, I was, in the letter to the Corinthians, I was taken up to the Greek word trito uranus, the third heaven. Why was he raptured to the third heaven? Where's the first and second? There are levels in heaven. There are levels of different glory in heaven, and we are in heaven with different levels of glory in proportion to our merits. The merits graciously earned, given to us by God. Now, God rewards us graciously out of his generosity. He's not a strict judge. He rewards us according to our good will and how much we do for him in faith. This is what this parable is saying. You are free. How do you respond to the sower and his seed, the word and grace? You can respond by rejecting it outright, or respond superficially for a short time, or respond generously but then let the world collapse upon you and destroy your faith, or respond generously to different degrees. It's up to you how you respond. All right, then we move to verse 21. And he said to them, Is a lamp brought in to be put under a bushel or under a bed and not on a stand? What's this bit about now? This is Jesus preparing the disciples to be apostles one day, so that these parables, which are not understood by many at the moment, will be able to be understood in the future by the ones he sends. So what's this lamp under a bushel? What's a bushel? It's a type of bowl. It's an old English word for a bowl. So you've got a lamp. You don't bury the lamp under a bowl and keep it there forever. Eventually the light must shine. So I'm speaking in parables, and in a sense the message is under a bowl for many, but eventually these parables are going to have the bowl lifted and the light will need to shine to all. You disciples are going to be the instruments of that. For there is nothing hidden except to be made manifest. So my teaching is somewhat hidden now through parables, but one day it will be made manifest. That is revealed to all. By whom? You disciples. Nor is anything secret except to come to light. Again, you are the ones to make it come to light one day. If any man has ears to hear, let him hear. And he said to them, Take heed what you hear. The measure you give will be the measure you get, and still more will be given you. For to him who has will more be given, and from him who has not, even what he has will be taken away. So, what's going on here? Again, it's about generosity. Now, notice here, the measure you give will be the measure you get. So you are rewarded graciously by God in proportion to your merits. Now, strictly speaking, theologically, we don't merit strictly in God when it comes to God. We can't compel God to reward us for anything, because everything we do somehow will be tainted by some level of, self-love or imperfect motive or whatever. God judges us graciously. So he looks at the general goodwill that we have and what we do in faith for him. But so the more we, again, re-emphasizing the point we made with the previous parable, the more we do for him, the more we will be rewarded. But listen to these words, and still more will be given you. What does that mean? This is about the generosity of God. God rewards in a manner more generously than we deserve. So this is like a loving father. you do something good, he's not just going to reward you strictly legally. He's going to reward you generously. You're going to get a greater glory in heaven than strictly legally you deserve. Again, this is a graciousness. This is what John means. John, Yahweh is gracious. Yohanan, Hanan means gracious. God is gracious. So in his reward for us, he is more generous in his rewarding of us than we strictly deserve. That's wonderful news, okay? And from him who has not, even what he has will be taken away. So let's put it frankly here. If you're hopeless, if you're not generous, if you're poor, if you fail in love of God above all things and your neighbour as yourself, if you're not fruitful in faith, if you're culpable for your rejection, your resistance, then you're going to lose everything. Even the little you have will be taken away. So it's like someone, a school student, like a school student might hand in an assignment. Now, this has happened. I'll give you from my own assignment, which was so good. I gave the girl 33 out of 30. Of course, the other students complained. How can you give her 33 out of 30? Easy, I just write 33 over 30. Done it. Right? It was so good. And in a sense, that's how God rewards us. More than we deserve. Another student hands in an assignment, it's awful. It's an insult. And you look at it, there's something there. There's something there, Susan. I know this is your question. There's something there, but you're supposed to do this, and you hand in this. Now, strictly speaking, you get a half out of 10. But I'm so angry at this, you're getting 0. That's what this parable means. And from him who has not, even what he has, the half will be taken away. But St. Augustine says here that even those in hell do receive a tempered hell. Meaning that God, even in his mercy, is even operating to some extent in hell. That no one in hell is getting the hell they strictly deserve. That even their hell is somewhat mitigated.
Who said that?
St. Augustine of Hippo. Okay? Don't ask me the precise reference. But if you push me, I'll come back with it next week. All right. The parable about seeds. And where are we? Okay, we're doing well. We might finish a little early. So if you've got more questions, we'll take some questions. Verse 26. And he said, the kingdom of God is as if a man should scatter seed upon the ground. Now this is a very short parable and only in the Gospel of Mark. It's in no other Gospel. And we've had this parable of the sower, and that's about Jesus working in the world. His word, his grace, and how we respond. But now he's talking about his disciples being apostles and how they are going to work in the world and how that is going to work out in the world. The kingdom of God is as if a man should scatter seed upon the ground. That's the disciples, the apostles, and their successors. That includes us, by the way. You're not doing this Bible study just to be passive agents. When Pierre and I talked about this months ago, Pierre's primary objective was that we have to be apostles too, to live out your baptism and your confirmation. So this applies to all of us in this room, because in one way or another, you're an apostle to someone. It's your husband or your wife, or your mum or your dad, or your brothers and your sisters, or your children and your grandchildren, or your nieces and your nephews, or your neighbours, or your work colleagues. In one way or another, you're an apostle. And one day, someone else in this room, multiples of you need to step up in one way or another and have your own table, leading your own study group somewhere. In the home, in a formal setting, if you're a school teacher or if you're a catechist or whatever. God will, if you want that, God will show you where that will be one day. So I'm going to speak as if I'm speaking to you, and this is applying to you personally. You should scatter seed upon the ground and should sleep and rise night and day. So this is your daily work. You're working hard. And sometimes you're like some of those catechists who came to me when I was at CCD, Confraternity of Christian Doctrine, and they said, look, I've been doing this for years, decades. Some did it 40, 50, 60. One woman did it 75 years, voluntary catechesis from the age of 16 until she died at the age of 92, working in the parish at Marrickville there, St. Casimir, Marrickville. And they come up to me and they say, well, we don't know if we're doing any good. We're working at it every week, year in, year out. We're teaching so many kids, primary school, some secondary school. We don't know if we're doing any good. Well, this is what Jesus is saying. When you're out there doing the work of the apostle and you're working assiduously at it, you can't measure and know exactly if you're doing any good, because you can't see what's happening in the hearts and minds of people. You're going to teach, you're going to proclaim, you're going to drop seeds, and then you see these people you taught going wayward, and you're wondering, oh, that went astray. But no. You've still dropped the seeds and they're there. There's something there. So when they go down those wayward paths, you'll be surprised sometimes how many of them come back, because they have something to come back to. And this is the failure of education systems if we don't teach the whole truth, and we're particularly afraid about teaching sexual morality and what the Sixth Commandment entails for all of us. Oh, we don't want to scare them off. We don't want complaints from the parents, so we'll stay silent on this. But all those children by the millions, tens of millions, hundreds of millions around the world for decades are not going to get the church's teaching, so we leave a void that's going to be filled by someone else. Principally Hollywood or Netflix or the music industry or the magazine industry or whatever it is going to fill that void. And they're not going to put in any goodness, truth or beauty into that void. And when those people hit the dead end, and they will hit the dead end, and they see that it's empty and they wonder why, I'm not happy, I'm not fulfilled. I thought sex, drugs and rock and roll was going to lead me to nirvana. All right? And it doesn't. Why am I empty? If they haven't been taught anything, what have they got to come back to? And that's why suicide rates are so high, because they don't know what to come back to. But when you are a missionary and you're teaching the hard teachings, and they're 15 and 16 and they're rebelling in the back of the classroom, and they're telling you they're not interested, and I don't care, I'm going to flirt. This is what I was told. I'm going to flirt, and I'm going to flirt with a billionaire. Well, good luck, lady. Okay. And I don't care what you say. I'm going to use contraception. My wife's going to use contraception. I don't care what you say. Okay. And what's wrong with taking drugs? You got a problem with taking drugs? Because these boys were doing it every day, right? But these are the students you see now in the masses with their families and their kids, 4 or 5 kids. And they're there at the mass every Sunday at 10 a.m. And you don't necessarily see the super bright kids who are the glamour glitterati students who got 95 plus ATAR. You don't necessarily see them. You do see some of them. But I see more of those bricklayer, concreter, tiler, carpenter, footballer types than I see of those glamour students. Because they did what they wanted to do, and they realised it was a dead end and it was empty. But guess what? They had something to come back to. Which is why one student in 2017 told me, that student who said, I don't care what you say, I'm going to use contraception, told me that in 1997. And 20 years later, I saw him in 2017, and he said to me, I was going to commit suicide, and I had the rope around my neck hanging from the ceiling. And I was married with 3 children. But then my phone went off. And I looked at my phone, and I saw a picture of my wife and children, and I decided not to commit suicide. And that same student who was rebellious 20 years ago said, I want to thank you for teaching me what you taught me, because you taught me suicide was wrong. And even though I didn't want to believe all what you said at the time, I believe it now. Through other people who had influence on him to help him bring him back. But he had something to come back to. So when you're teaching, when you're one of these apostles, you're sleeping and you're rising, you're doing it day by day, night by night. You don't see what's going on, and sometimes you might despair, but we shouldn't despair. And the seed should sprout and grow, and he knows not how. So when you're working, things are still happening, even though you can't tell. Because ultimately, you're just the instrument. The real sower who's giving the grace is Christ, God. He's the one that's really working. You're an instrument and a faithful instrument, so you're helping to facilitate this as a what we say, secondary cause, but you're still essential. Then the earth produces fruit of itself, first the blade, then the ear, then the full grain in the ear. So you work consistently over a long period of time, and your work will show fruit. Using the imagery of corn here, it will grow steadily. But Christ isn't speaking here just of each individual who are coming to fruition in their faith. He's speaking of the overall church as well. This is how the church will start. And all those small people, the labourers in the vineyard, are helping it, are instruments helping it to grow slowly over the centuries. And God is there in the background as the first mover, as the giver of grace, making this growth happen through our work. Even though at the time we might think, hey, this is not getting anywhere, one persecution after another from the Roman Empire, and we're just being killed by the millions, but it's still growing. And it would conquer the Roman Empire one day. But when the grain is ripe, and once he puts in the sickle, at once he puts in the sickle because the harvest has come. So this is a parable, small and only in this gospel, but it's really speaking about the whole history of the church. How it will slowly grow over the centuries through the work of his missionaries, his apostles, and that bit about the sickle, harvest time, is the end of the world, when he comes to judge the living and the dead. That's it. So this is the whole panorama of the church. We're called to be part of this parable. We're part of this parable. What are we going to do to help grow this kingdom and be ready for the harvest time? Next one, verse 30. And he said, with what can we compare the kingdom of God? What parable shall we use for it? It is like a grain of mustard seed, which, when sown upon the ground, is the smallest of all the seeds on earth. Yet when it is sown, it grows up and becomes the greatest of all shrubs, and puts forth large branches, so that the birds of the air can make nests in its shade. So what's the kingdom of God here? Again, this is foretelling the church. Now, you get some, in apologetics, you get some radical groups who say, only the Catholic Church can be the whore of Babylon and the kingdom of the Antichrist, because only it is large enough of all the churches to dominate the world. And these are people who belong to small sectarian groups of a few million or tens of millions. And I'll name some of them: the Jehovah's Witnesses, the Seventh-day Adventists, maybe the Mormons as well. All these small groups, whatever they are, there's hundreds of thousands. And they see it as a sign of the Antichrist or the whore, that the whore, one sign of the whore is that it's going to be worldwide. But they don't get this parable. Because of the kingdom of God that Christ will establish, namely his church, is meant to be worldwide, not just some small sect founded in the 19th century in the United States, or some national-based church, like sorry for saying this, the Church of England or the Church of Germany or the Church of whatever other country. It's meant to be worldwide. So how do we know that? it becomes the greatest of all shrubs and puts forth large branches so that the birds of the air can make nests in its shade. Who are the birds of the air? All the nations, all the peoples, all the different races. The church of Christ that he will plant is meant to grow, be worldwide, and encapsulate in it, incorporate in it, all the peoples of the world. So how many churches can fulfill this parable image? What's interesting here is that it starts small. Yeah, that was Jesus and the 12. And in the upper room at the Last Supper, that's all there were. And at Pentecost, there was 120 of them. And likewise on Mount Olivet at the Ascension, there's only about 120 of them. And they're the ones Jesus commands and says, go make disciples of all nations. Well, if Jesus wasn't divine, you would have said good luck to the disciples. You're up against 80 million in the Roman Empire, let alone India, China, the indigenous peoples of the Americas, Australia and Africa. Good luck, guys. All right? Okay. This is the small seed that he plants. But it's going to grow over the centuries, like we just heard in the previous parable. First the blade, then the ear, then the full grain. Now, what does this also refer to? An Old Testament passage, Daniel 2, verses 34 to 35. This is that famous dream of Nebuchadnezzar that our Jehovah's Witnesses, Seventh-day Adventist friends always like to refer to, but they don't get the last bit right. In this dream, Nebuchadnezzar sees a great statue. Head of gold, arms, shoulders of torso of silver, hips, thighs of bronze, legs of iron, feet of iron mixed in clay. And in this dream, Nebuchadnezzar, he's the king of Babylon, by the way, Babylon at its height. The prophet Daniel is there in captivity in Babylon. And in this dream, Nebuchadnezzar sees a tiny rock. It's called an acheropota, not made of human hands. The rock is specifically referred to as not made by human hands. And it descends down this mountain, and it gathers pace, then it swings off the mountain, and it hits this statue in the feet of clay, and the statue collapses. And then the wind comes and blows all of it away as dust. And then this small stone grows into a large mountain that covers the world. That's the dream Nebuchadnezzar has. And he's perplexed by this dream. So he gets in all his public servants and astrologers and necromancers and all these wizards and all that. And he asks for an interpretation of this dream. But none of them understand it and can give him an interpretation. Now, because there was no unions in that time, these civil servants had no rights. So Nebuchadnezzar executed all of them. No job security in Babylon, all right? Okay? And then he hears about this Daniel, Jewish fellow who could interpret dreams, and he gets him in. And Daniel instantly knows what the dream means. So you're Nebuchadnezzar now. And Daniel says, the head of gold is you, great king. Oh, Nebuchadnezzar's happy. Oh, I'm the head of gold. Of course I am. I'm the king of Babylon. All right? I'm the most powerful man in the world at the time. But there'll be another kingdom who'll come after you. That's the silver kingdom. Now I'm paraphrasing here. The silver kingdom, Babylon was destroyed by the Persian and Mede kingdom. The Persians swept through. Now we're going to 539 BC. They defeated the Babylonians at the Battle of Opis, and the following year they entered Babylon. And at that time, Belteshazzar's the king, and he's having a party, and he's drinking from the sacred vessels of the Jews that they used in temple worship, and there appears that hand on the wall. Many, many take all you fasten. You've been weighed, measured, and found wanting. And Persia, Mede, eclipses the Babylonians. They're the silver kingdom. But then the bronze kingdom is another kingdom that will come and eclipse the Persian Mede kingdom. And that's Alexander the Great, the Greco-Macedonian kingdom. And then those kingdoms, that kingdom will be eclipsed by another one. That's the kingdom of the iron legs. That's the Roman Empire, who will move eastwards and swallow the Diadochi. That is the remnant kingdoms that succeeded Alexander the Great. The Seleucid kingdom and the Ptolemaic kingdom in Egypt. The Seleucid kingdom based in Syria and the Ptolemaic kingdom based in Egypt. Rome swallows them up. And it's two legs of iron because Rome is the first empire of the East and the West. And all this is standing on feet of clay mixed with iron, meaning false worship, false gods. Okay, where are the builders here? They're unsound foundations, right? And just strike the unsafe, insecure foundations, and this statue, these kingdoms all based on false gods, will fall. And what strikes? This Acharopota. Who's that Acharopota that grows bigger and bigger and bigger? It's Jesus and the apostles, and the infant church growing bigger, bigger and bigger as it gets down that hill. It fits into the imagery here. It is the smallest of all seeds, but it will grow into the great tree and will consume the Roman Empire and cover the earth. That prophecy is a prediction of the Messianic kingdom. And that is the church, one holy Catholic and Apostolic, that Christ founds. Not made of human hands means made by God and sent by God. We come back to that original point made earlier. Sent with authority, not self-sent with one's own authority. So sadly, and this is an apologetical study of Scripture here, it's not these man-made churches that come after Jesus that found themselves and send themselves. That's not the will of God for this one united tree to be. All the branches are linked into the one trunk, one tree, but we have divisions everywhere, schisms everywhere, contradictions everywhere, heresies everywhere. This is not sent or authorized by God. But where you see division and contradiction, you see the fingerprint of the diabolo. That is the divider. That's the name for Lucifer. The Greek word diabolos means the divider. It's not the work of God who's the unifier. The use of, verse 33. I might finish 5 minutes early deliberately so I give you any opportunity for questions. With many such parables he spoke the word to them as they were able to hear it. He did not speak to them without a parable. But privately to his own disciples he explained everything. And again, at the risk of repeating myself, he's speaking without parables to the disciples privately because they're the elect that he's chosen who will lead the church when he's gone and be the source of teaching and truth to everyone else. 35. On that day when evening had come, he said to them, let us go across to the other side. Again, this is the Sea of Galilee. By the way, who's been to the Holy Land here? Who's been to the Sea of Galilee? Great. Not enough of you. You've got to go one day. Trust me. One day when COVID's over and there's about 5 minutes of peace in the Middle East, take advantage of that and go. Because we hope one day to do it. Where's Father Benton here? You can get him. We want a parish pilgrimage. Okay. And eventually he'll do one, I'm sure. No. All right. Yeah. But I'm telling you, for your own spiritual benefit, they call it the fifth gospel. And I can picture in my mind when I'm reading this what the Sea of Galilee is like. How beautiful, how tranquil, and the mountains that surround it, and where the place where it's traditionally believed to be where the Sermon of the Mount was given, the Mount of Beatitudes, all that, magnificent. And leaving the crowd, they took him with them, just as he was in the boat. And other boats were with him. So there's Jesus in one boat with his disciples, and other boats following. And a great storm of wind arose, which if I picture it right now, I can't imagine it because it's such a beautiful and tranquil place every time I've been. And you get on these large boats and they're designed to have mass said. So you have masses on these boats. in the middle of the Sea of Galilee in most tranquil setting. It's beautiful. Yes, it's one of those moments.
Yeah.
All right, okay. And a great storm of wind arose, and the waves beat into the boat, so that the boat was already filling. And he was in the stern, back of the boat, asleep on the cushion. And they woke him, and he said, "Teacher, do you not care if we perish?" And he awoke and rebuked the wind. And he said to the sea, "Peace, be still." In the Greek, it's actually literally "shut up, be still." In the Greek, it's a rebuke, and the language is quite terse, really. And the wind ceased, and there was a great calm. And he said to them, "Why are you afraid? Have you no faith?" And they are filled with awe, and said to one another, "Who then is this, that even wind and sea obey him?" They're still learning who Jesus really is. One thing without a doubt at this point, they don't know he's the divine Son of God yet. When he does this, they get a new insight into who he really is, and they're beginning to tremble here in awe. Who is this person really? Because according to Psalms 89, 93, 107, only God is the Lord of nature and can control nature. So by getting up and saying, "Peace, be still," he's acting in the place of God and exercising a power Jews traditionally believed only God had or has, to dominate nature. Now this is the literal here, this is how we read it, but the spiritual here is very deep, and this is an allegory about our spiritual life, okay? We begin our spiritual journey after baptism, so we're travelling the sea, and it starts off calm, and we're with Jesus, but then our spiritual lives, we have many troubles, many temptations, sometimes doubts, tribulations. We're tested. This is the storm. And where's Jesus in this storm? Sometimes we're praying, and are you hearing me? Are you there? What, you seem to be asleep, God. Where are you? You know, and that's another temptation we suffer. So this parable is exhorting us in our spiritual lives to remain calm in the storm, to keep confidence in the storm, and to pray, even though it seems like the Lord is asleep, he's not asleep. And you persevere in the prayer, he will answer, and he will bring peace and consolation and end this spiritual storm. Who then is this that even wind and sea obey him? Good. On that note, we can conclude. We've got 5 minutes. I'm very happy to take any questions from the floor.
Well, can I ask the first one?
Yes.
Well, in Monday's reading at church, at Mass, one of the readings, Peter referred to Mark as "my son." So, remember last week we talked about had no...
That's right. Yeah. And some comment, the question is... Can you paraphrase it? Yeah. The question is, the reading that we heard last Monday, St. Peter refers to St. Mark as "my son." So does that mean that, St. Peter was married, well, he probably had children, was one of those children St. Mark? The commentators say that this is more a reference to St. Mark being a convert, catechized and baptized by St. Peter. That's probably the correct answer. There is a blood relationship between St. Mark and St. Barnabas, and most commentators say that is relationship between cousins. Some commentators say that's an uncle-nephew relationship. All right, there. If you could stand in a strong voice.
Can you just repeat the question?
Yeah.
You know, with the parable of the seeds, how it has 30, 60 and 90, does that correlate?
30, 60 and 100.
30, 60 and 100. Would you say like 30 and 60, they're like 30's got a longer time in purgatory and 100's got like no time in purgatory? Does it correlate at all? Or?
Look, perhaps, but That's not. Does this mean if you're 30 and 60, you're going to be in purgatory, and if you're 100, you're not? Of course, there are souls known to God who die and they go straight to heaven and they don't endure any purgatory. And one reason for that, maybe they obtained a plenary indulgence, which is a remission of all temporal punishment due to sin beforehand. All right. You could say that with some level of safety, but the real meaning of the parable is, as I said, it's about our level of free, generous response to God. And of course, the more you are generous, the more you do for God, the more good works you do in grace. Grace, when you do a good work in grace, it has multiple effects. It increases your glory in heaven, and it also has a satisfactory effect. That is, you remit your time in purgatory. So every time you do a good work in grace, God will reward you with a greater glory in heaven. At the same time, your temporal punishment due to unforgiven sins or venial sins, all right, unforgiven venial sins, is remitted. So there's some truth in what you're saying. The more you do for God, the more of your temporal punishment due to sin is remitted. Okay?
When you say in grace, do you mean in sanctified?
Yeah, when you're in a state of grace, yes. You can't merit in the eyes of God if you're in a state of mortal sin, as we say traditionally. Robert, you had a question? I've got time for one, maybe two questions. I will end it at 9:30. Any other questions? Arlette?
No, in the Apostles' Creed, we say, I believe in one Catholic and Apostolic Church. Is it incumbent upon all Catholics, when we say that creed, to have that in mind, that we should all be apostolic?
Apostolic there means in succession to the apostles, from the apostles. So it's about how the church that is of Christ is the one that was founded by him upon the apostles and has existed and has continued ever since, rooted in the apostles and succeeding the apostles. So it's not a church that was founded in recent times or in the 10th century or 5th century or 15th century or whatever. It's one that was founded in the 1st century by Christ upon the apostles, who gives the full plenitude of the faith given once and for all to the saints, to the apostles, and they pass on the tradition. The apostolic tradition is what Christ gave to the apostles, and that's the church that has existed for 2,000 years. You're talking about being apostolic in activity.
Exactly.
Yeah,
verse 26. So I'm trying to draw out of you how we can be apostolic in a very PC kind of society in our everyday lives. And
it is difficult, and we don't deny it's difficult, and some people naturally can do it better than others, and some people find it in their work context or family context that they can get nowhere, and that is a problem for many people. Don't forget, Jesus said, you're not a prophet in your own home. And Jesus suffered that himself, and that's what I call Nazareth syndrome, because his home was Nazareth and they didn't accept him. But the starting point for all of us, and this is where I'll finish, the starting point for being apostolic is being good example. That's the starting point. Integrity, because no one's going to listen to you if you don't have integrity. If you have integrity, then if you're going to speak, then you got people will listen to you. So that's the first thing you need to do. Be holy, be authentic, have integrity, and then when you feel that the opportunity has come and you can speak, then you'll be, people will give you the time and listen to you. Yes?
When we're talking in Mark chapter 4, 24-25 about the measure you give with the measure you get, and from those who have nothing, even what they have will be taken away.
Yeah.
We were talking about if we don't abide by him through bearing the fruits of the Spirit and doing his will, our gifts will be taken from us. What is this referring to? Can we lose our salvation?
Yes, you can lose your salvation, absolutely. This concept of once saved, always saved, which is a evangelical belief, or perseverance of the saints, which is a Presbyterian Reformed belief, is not scriptural. Of course you can lose your faith. These people, they received with joy. What does that mean? If they received with joy and then they fell away, they lost their salvation. Of course we can lose. I have a talk on this. I can give you dozens of other quotes referring to this, yes.
So does that mean we can regain our salvation?
You can lose it and gain it constantly. This is the life that we live, that we're in grace and we can fall away, but we can come back. Because God doesn't abandon anyone while we're still alive. So as we walk this journey to our heavenly Jerusalem, there's going to be trials and tribulations. There'll be times we fall. And then you can recover, because God is still working on you to give you a bad conscience, to enlighten you and make you realize, hey, I've done something wrong. I need to repent. So yes, you can lose your salvation, and because God is still working on you, you can recover. Now, I know even Protestants through my work at chaplaincy who abandoned their faith. And they were people who believed that you can't lose your salvation. And then they became atheists. So I had this experience at high school. When I went to the Billy Graham Crusade in 1979, I went with 3 people. One was Stephen the Baptist, and 2 others were Andrew and Joseph. And we all came back absolutely ecstatic from the event. Andrew and Joseph accepted Jesus Christ that day, that night. They both later fell. So how do we judge that? That their acceptance of Jesus was somehow fraudulent or a facade or not real? It was real. But like this parable, their reception was in soil that was shallow, and then they eventually fell away. Or their faith life was choked and died, and they fell away. But even now, if they're still alive, those 2 men, God's still working on them. And they can one day realize that they need to repent and regain back in the life of grace. Okay. Look, I am conscious of the time. I make a promise not to keep you beyond 9:30. So we'll finish now, and any questions you can see me at the table.